Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. This video is quite a sideways type of video in that we're not really developing any further with the dome hubs, but as I mentioned in a previous video, if you can understand more or better, you'll have more clarity when you're moving forward. Now this is quite, it's piddling really in the scheme of things, but I made a comment that I kept on making the comment, more to myself than anyone else, that the struts are at relatively different heights to each other. Geometrically, the centre line on the top surface of the struts, the way I've drawn them and orientated them, are all perfectly aligned, positioned, angled, etc. They all come to a common point. Now if I just hide the central hub here, you can see that they indeed all come to a common height. But that's about it. They all have their own relative positions and heights, etc. There's self-evident. But when I was making the hubs, I did notice something that I hadn't considered, and that's the crux of this video. It's the things that you don't consider or are unaware of that can trip you up. And the hubs, of course, the flat plate would come at different points on the surfaces of the struts. Means that if you were to use a flat plate and fix your struts to it, you would be lifting them out of their geometrical position. And that maybe become an issue when you go to start using dihedral angles for rigid surfaces, as I've alluded to several times in a few of the later videos. So to better understand that, I make miniature models, and these are all taken from a full-size dome so that they have that correct orientation. I'm not introducing unintended angles and errors in there for observations. And to achieve that, I made sure that they're all, in this case, just for the exercise, the struts are all 300 long. And they have quite a different look. They're not a hexagon as you might think, with the struts radiating off at 60 degrees, or between them at 60 degrees, because we don't have that geometry in the grid-based domes. And I wanted to see what the different sized discs would generate as far as the differences go, and there's a reason behind it. So in that process, and this is the point, you make little models up so you can better understand it. And when you do understand it, it's so self-obvious, and probably some of you, if you may be ahead of me already in that understanding, and I wished I was there. But it's interesting for me to go through the exercise, and in this case we're looking at these 1, 2, 3, 4 positions of the vertical lines, how they are different lengths for the different struts, and they obviously will be different because each strut's at a different angle. And these two struts, the one on the left and the right, has a greater angle, and therefore the further you go out from the center point of the geometrical center, the differences would increase quicker than that same distance out from the center for these other struts, which surprisingly are not very much different in angle to each other and therefore height. So when you're making a plate, or you're finding a physical position for a plate or a hub or etc., you've got to take in consideration just how different these struts are compared to these ones. And you can see with a distance radially out from the center line of 125 millimeters, if I do draw a vertical line, I'll just use this one here, it is around about 26 millimeters, whereas here it's about 33 millimeters. So we've got about a 7 millimeter difference in the height between them. But when we come up top, come in closer, that difference is only 2 or 3 millimeters, or 4 millimeters, say. So again, drawing the line from there down to there is about 10 millimeters, but from here is 13, so about 3 millimeters. That makes sense when you think about it. If this is angled more, of course it's going to have a much steeper rate of increase. So when we come to do the plates, it's ideal, therefore, to have your diameter of your plates as close to the center as possible. But we have to have a practical minimum, and for me it's 100 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters in radius, for that hub. Now that I am fully aware of that, as I go forward, I can make more assumptions more accurately. It also means that I can start to consider how much I want to fudge where I put my plates and the cuts, because I'm considering slotting the struts to allow the tabs of a plate to come into the strut at different heights, meaning that the top surfaces remain perfectly aligned along the geometrical center line. I do this so that people having various desired outcomes will be able to achieve it without having the fudge factor that I may build in for my own dome. It doesn't influence the... I sometimes have trouble with my words, don't I? But sometimes that will influence the outcomes, and therefore my fudge factor becomes your confusion. We don't want that. And now that I've jumped over to another drawing, and you can start to see that if the surface is different, if this surface is relatively different to this, then of course the struts or the cut will have to be different for the different tabs or the wings or the star plate. Or you have to start thinking that if you go in close enough and the difference is so small, maybe 3 millimeters, that you could lift one by say 1.5 and drop one by 1.5, so you 60-40 it, you 50-50, whatever your terminology is, so that without having to introduce too much complexity, you get it really within the physical limitations of how we can manufacture accurately enough. Or you try and keep the struts exactly where they should be, and you alter where the tabs are and have packers under them onto your center ring. So if I got rid of this was just for alignment. So if you have this situation, I'll get rid of this for better clarity, and that. Okay, so this may be what you have. The cuts, in this case, if you're I'll say I've kind of trapped myself in my logic. I've actually, on this version, I've actually lowered the tabs onto a solid plate, and that's why I have to have a different height cut in my struts, because I think making the hub as simple as possible, i.e. all the tabs bearing directly on the hub, on the center, on this donut of a hub, is probably going to be better than trying to have the cuts exactly the same on your struts. I can't see that the issue, no matter how you cut them, that you're going to have to mark them out for each strut anyway, and unless you've got some sort of jig sorted up which can accommodate both versions, you can cut them at whatever darn height you want them to and keep your hub standard. I see that now as a better way forward. I still may not use, I almost certainly won't be using this approach. I'm still going to be using the, now if I just back out a few, the center ring where you've got its tube, but I want to look at the other options, and as I said, long story, if you better understand the implications of this approach, it may help you when you come to create your own. And this is my preferred option here, where I thread into the timber a 12mm threaded rod, or even maybe a 16mm threaded rod, and then you can slot the ring over them for assembly purposes, or in other words, you could bring the strut up underneath and hold your strut in place once you tighten it up. You could say that if anything loosens up, that it could fall out, but yeah, I really don't see that ever happening. And we're going to be putting a locating screw in the top, so it can't physically move, and you've got the strength from the heavy duty rod and the wee bit of insurance with a screw. So the screw's not doing a lot, it just stops it rotating, so it maintains alignment better, and it stops it being able to drop out, which it won't be able to do because of the physical, it's actually the length of the top of the strut's longer than the distance that it wants to move into, so I can't see that being a problem. So you can see that even though I'm working on this as well, I'm coming at it from a multi-pronged position, and I actually picked up the information through this. So, and that's the difference in heights. So, waffling on, and which I'm going to stop now, don't limit yourself. Have a look at all the other options. I've looked at the star plates where they're a pressed plate or cut plate. I think that's a really, really nice idea. But remembering part of the criteria, this is a built DIY type approach. Just because I've got the capabilities of getting things cut, laser cut, at my local company I use, does not mean that that's the method that we should use all the time. I can get things engineered. I've got a friendly engineer, but I want to. My aim is to be able to do this in someone's garage, where they've got a limited workshop, and it still function near as good as these fancy hubs. So that's my perspective, and that's why I do these exercises, and I enjoy them. I hope you get some benefit from them. Okie dokie. Might remake this video less wordy. Right, anyway, until then, see you later. Bye.